Hey guys, CJ Farrell here from BirdDog. I just want to make a quick video addressing some of the P200 comments and trying to help basically get a better image out of your P200, especially out of the box. We've seen a lot of comments with the noise, with the grain, and kind of wanted to show you some of the settings that we usually end up playing with that we find that helps with the image. And you know, we still believe that the P200 is a great image module, great camera, and can be used in so many different variety of settings. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. As you can see on the left is my image. I kind of just arranged a couple objects from my office to make a little bit colorful of a backdrop. And on the right is the camera settings, which we will kind of go through side by side. So to start, I have image settings reset. This right here is my out-of-the-box image. As you can see, it's not terrible. There is a little bit of noise, and we'll kind of dive into some of the setting pages that can help you get a better image out of your P200. So if we go ahead and go to exposure as our first tab, I'll kind of go into my screen here, and we'll walk through some of these pages, and then we'll do a change and comparison. So on the exposure, full auto is great. Some people will want to use manual for sure. If you do have, static lighting, manual might be the way to go if you want that to not change at all. If you do have some dynamic things, full auto is decent, and I ended up using it for a lot of my situations. But either of those two can be great uses. Some people will swear by shutter and iris. I usually end up in full auto or manual personally. Going through, we won't really mess with white balance that much. I'm just on auto for this indoor shot. And one thing I do want to address, at least for this little demonstration, this image here on the left is in my office, and the only source of light right now that I do have is this can light that you see here. So I just have this one can light. I don't have studio lighting. It's not fancy. So I kind of want to show that you can get, a decent image without a crazy amount of noise and grain just from the one light source. So flipping back over to the screen, going into picture one, one of the big things that we do see on the forums, sharpness. This out of the box is set to 0, and a lot of people will say that is unusable, which I do kind of tend to lean obviously to the negative side, but I will show you that you can actually get a decent image even being at 0, but I do personally end up in the negative 40 to 50 range personally. Going over to picture 2, we'll go to that setting. You can do some highlight compensation and masks if you want. On the background that I have, it's just a white wall, so I'm probably not going to end up really doing that. Something I do end up using is backlight compensation. Oftentimes, especially if I have a very poorly lit scenario, I will mess with this to help me get those highlights out of my image. If I go back to this dual screen, when I turn backlight compensation on, you will see this image get overexposed pretty quickly. You can see on my histogram, everything shifts to the right, the highlights are now blown out, and you can barely make out the texture on the white wall. It's kind of up to you, but as we take down some of our other settings, we might end up using this. We'll go back and forth. Backlight compensation back off. The other thing, gamma, I usually won't end up using this because it'll basically crunch the entire image and make it very underexposed. So gamma will leave in 0. Going to the advanced page, you can kind of see here, we do have video enhancement, which this is an interesting setting. We have seen people use this with success, and it's kind of up to personal preference, really. I'll show here me turning it on and off. If I turn it on, you will see the histogram at least kind of squeeze together and bring up some of those midtones. I think the image looks a little bit contrasty, and I could see the appeal for either side, but if you find that that's too much, you can go back. But this does help smooth out some of those underexposed black levels, and we'll kind of get to another setting here in a second and show you a really good way to help with the black levels in your image. And that is not brightness, but it is gamma offset. So this is kind of one of the sleeper settings that we see, and gamma offset helps us raise the levels in the blacks of the image, and this has kind of been one of the secret sauce tools to help people get, a really good image out of the box. We will be working to make this a little bit more uniform for firmware updates to get better settings for everyone. But at 0 gamma offset, we usually end up with very underexposed blacks. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the side-by-side here and show you what gamma offset actually does. If I take my gamma offset all the way up to max, you will see now my video in my histogram is shifted to the right. Everything is very overexposed and bright. If I go all the way to the left, everything's crunched, very dark blacks. And so out of the box at 0, we end up usually being a little bit underexposed. And what happens is with those crunchy blacks, the auto exposure will end up working overtime to try to bring up those blacks, and that's usually what we end up seeing as these noisy, grainy images on the forums and people's comments. So when I'm playing with gamma offset, I usually like to start somewhere around 20, and you'll see kind of everything is lifted up a little bit, and I'm still in the kind of, trying to make the mountain out of my histogram. Once again, it's very difficult with this white wall, with these black cameras in the image, but this gives me a little bit better of a starting point, especially to play with my full auto exposure. If I go back to video enhancement, once again, you'll kind of see this go off the charts here. So I'm going to probably leave this off for this demo. But now let's go ahead and go back to exposure and play with that a little bit now that we've messed with our gamma offset. So on the gain limit, this is usually what I'll mess with next. 28.6 right now is our gain limit. And since I raised that gamma offset, I can actually afford to take this down a little bit. And you will see here, if I take my auto exposure response to 8, I usually actually end up liking this kind of a setting better. Because I can basically play with my gain and limit and kind of see that, at least on the histogram, really change slowly and get an idea of more effectively what's going on. So we started at 28.6. You can kind of see, it's a decent image. But if I go down to 21.4, let's see, we'll slide this down. 21.4. You'll kind of see this slides out, and now we're getting in a little bit more of a balanced image. So I'm going to leave this at 21.4 for now, and then I'm going to go back to picture 1. Now, right here, this is our image right now, and keep in mind, this is looking already better, and my sharpness right now is still at 0. So, as the example, if I take my sharpness all the way up to 128, all of a sudden we get really grainy, really noisy image. If I take it all the way to negative 128, it's very, you kind of have to rub your glasses, and it's a little bit blurry. So if I go back to 0, this now, by just raising the gamma offset, by adjusting my gain limit, I'm actually getting a usable image. And if I end up in this negative 50 world, I end up usually liking somewhere around here. That's negative 50. Here's negative 70. I'll split the difference and be at negative 60 here. All of a sudden, this is kind of a lot more of a passable image. Once again, if I take my noise reduction down to 0, you'll see that noise come into play again. But if I take my noise reduction up to 5, the image kind of settles out and is flat again. Flipping over back to picture 2 settings, the other things I can mess with is highlight compensation mask if I want. I probably won't end up doing. If I take it to medium and go to 3 on the setting, you kind of saw that histogram move there. If I take this back to 0 and go to off, you will see the histogram shrink a little bit here. So I'll probably just keep this off. I usually don't end up messing with highlight compensation that much, but with my white wall, you can see it shifting there right again. I'll usually try to get this to be as to make my white wall, I guess, is not overexposed as possible. So I'll go back to 0 there, and now our image is looking pretty good here. We don't have all that noise in the blacks. We can still see our white wall. We don't really have that much visual noise on our image. And kind of just going back to my side-by-side or my screen here, I'll kind of walk through once again what I have. I have full auto exposure. I have my auto response a little bit slower. And I have my gain limit right now at 21.4, which I think I like is the best option here. If I go to exposure compensation, I can also mess with that if I want. You'll see my... Let me go back to the side-by-side so you guys can see. If I take my exposure compensation level to negative 128, it kills my image. If I go max to 127 it kind of gets back to normal. And then if I turn it off, you won't see that much change, but usually I won't, I usually don't mess with it that much. If I go back to the lower negatives, is kind of really where you can see the exposure compensation level take place. But I'm just going to go ahead and leave it off for now, and we'll see at least my histogram settle back out. If I go to picture 1, I'm at negative 60 sharpness, noise reduction of 5. I haven't really messed with my contrast, and keep in mind you still obviously have your color matrix to go through if you want, but this is more for that noise and grain issue that we've been seeing. Once again, highlight compensation we're not touching, and then that gamma offset is really kind of one of the big things that we want to tackle. So 20 is kind of where I'm at. I usually have been seeing good success between 15 and 25 as good levels to play with, but I think if you mess with that gamma offset, that sharpness, and that noise reduction, you can really, just with those 3 tools mixed with full auto exposure, you can get a much better image than you sometimes get out of the box. So hopefully this quick video helps you guys. Please feel free to give feedback and let us know what you think. Happy to help out however we can. Hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk to you later.